Hey everyone, welcome to Keeping It 100 podcast, Real Women, Real Talk with Adrian and Jackie.
Each week, we're going to dive into any and all topics, keeping it real, keeping it honest, and keeping it slightly uncomfortable.
Thank you so much for joining in to today's episode.
Now let's begin.
Hi everyone, my name is Jackie.
Hi everyone, it's Adrian.
And thank you so much for joining us here today, guys. So today we have super excited to have our favorite person, Terri Wexler, to our show. She's a very first guest to this show, and we're super stoked. So just a little bit about Terri. Terri has over 25 years experience as a therapist in home care, and she also runs her private practice currently through Zoom. And Terri is a very knowledgeable lady, and she holds a master's degree in social work, and her passion lies in the area of supporting those who have experienced loss of any kind. Hi, Terri. Thank you so much for joining Adrian and I today. We're so excited.
Hi, and I'm so excited to be here, and I'm also really excited and honored to be your first guest on this podcast. So I feel very fortunate to have been asked to talk about one of my favorite topics and supporting people.
Absolutely. I mean, we definitely believe that like everyone goes through grief in some way, shape or form. That it's a very important topic that I think a lot of people don't necessarily think it's necessary to go through the process of acknowledging it and living through it and all that good stuff. But you're a professional. That's why we have you here. You're the subject matter expert.
It's definitely an area that I'm passionate about. It's a hard area to talk about and to support people in talking about it, whether lots of different stuff that gets kind of mixed into it all, but I think it's important, and it's something that we all go through, and again, it's really important to talk about it and get that support, as hard as it is. It's definitely an important topic. And again, thank you for having me on.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Terri. I'm super excited as well. So we just dive right in.
Let's go for it. Let's do it.
All right, Terri. I would love to just start the topic off with just discussing, if you wouldn't mind sharing the clinical definition of grief and your own definition of it, just so everyone in the audience can understand. What is grief?
What is grief? Well, as we were talking a little bit earlier, I definitely do not go by the book when it comes to the practice, but really essentially when we experience a loss, grief is those emotions that we feel when we've had a loss. Now, that's kind of the clinical definition. It's important to acknowledge the fact that when we experience a loss, we have feelings, and those feelings is what grief is. And so when I explain and describe the definition of grief, it's like that container that we have inside of us, and inside the container are all these different feelings of anger, sadness, regret, remorse, maybe even some relief that the person is gone, fear. All those different feelings piled up into those container is what grief is. And those feelings have emotions attached to it. And so that really is the definition. And I think it's also important that people really understand that we don't experience those feelings, those grief feelings, only in relation to a physical loss. There are a whole bunch of other different kinds of grief that will stir up those feelings. The social, right? Going through a separation, going through a divorce, going through a breakup. Those are social. A job, let's talk about the losses people have had now, especially with COVID. Losing jobs. Those are huge losses. And then the feelings around that, what's that going to look like? How am I going to support my family? I went to school, I have a degree. Now I don't have any work. And then there's all the other types of, of losses as well. Like in my day-to-day job, with Alberta Health Services, is I support those that are caring for somebody in the community of a diagnosis of dementia. Talk about loss.
Yeah.
No kidding.
They're losing their loved one, their partners, situational, the ambiguous, those losses that they've had, those times that they've spent with them, whether it's watching Jeopardy, Wheel of Fortune, they can't do that anymore. So there's these different kinds of losses that we experience, our home, a move, that stir up these feelings of grief. And so again, that clinical definition is grief is that normal response to loss.
To a loss. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody just either going away or even passing on. The grief is just a feeling of all those things that you just mentioned, the feelings of like anger and all that stuff that you just mentioned today, right?
Yeah, that are pertaining specifically to, to a loss. Like, again, I know it's in one of the questions, pet loss, a loss of a friendship, lots of different kind of losses. Someone, beautiful questions, by the way. I wanted to thank everybody for these incredible questions. But all those types of loss, when we are robbed of something, we are grieved. And when we're grieved and when we are robbed of something that we've lost, whether we've had control over it or not, and in a physical loss of a death, or an employment loss, or a social loss of a separation, a friendship, we have feelings, and those are the grief are those feelings. Now, what we do with those feelings, the outward expression of those feelings, is what we would call mourning.
Right.
That's the crying, the sobbing, the building a fence, running out, doing that outward expression, expressing those feelings. That's what mourning is. So grief and mourning and bereavement all kind of go together.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
I'm trying to read your faces because we're taping this, everyone. And so here I am assessing Adrian and Jackie's face going, am I making any sense? Do they know what the hell I'm
Oh,
so,
yes, girl. I feel all this, but I also like, I'm thinking like this is kind of actually goes right into one of the questions we have that I'm also super curious when you talk about the outward expression of grief. What about when we don't outwardly express it? So we suppress it, or we don't want to show it, or we don't want to acknowledge it. Like what are the harmful effects, or are there any harmful effects? Like what does that look like? The flip.
Great question. And you know what? I can answer that one because in one word, yes, there will be harmful effects. Because if we keep it in, and it's something that we talk about, there's a name for that. That's called living in the shadows of the ghosts of grief. Grief is like a bear. It is like a bear in a cage. And the more we push it down and push it down and push it down, it will eventually start to roar and come up. And it will can come up in behaviors of anger, frustration, some maladaptive coping skills like drinking the pain away, doing some drugs to get that pain away, having relationship problems at work, trouble focusing, symptoms of depression and anxiety. And a lot of times when I see people, and not only, for grief, but in my practice, I always ask, especially when I was just doing, counseling, tell me about some of the losses that you've had. And not in relation, again, to death. I mean, that's a huge piece, but not only in relation to that. And if we don't acknowledge those losses, go through the pain of those losses, again, whatever they are, we definitely can start to run into some problems for sure. Yeah,
for sure.
Okay. So Terri, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go for it. Did I interrupt?
Adrian, was Is that kind of what
Yeah.
you're looking for? Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So-
And I mean, I definitely can understand. I've been very much like a firsthand experience with the harmful effects to health of suppressing it. I do feel like Jackie and I were just talking about this, where we often, a lot of people just don't understand that connection of our inward and outward. So yeah, thank you so much for clarifying.
Yeah, and you know, the inward is where we keep that container of those feelings of grief, our responses to it. But if we don't mourn outward, acknowledging those feelings, even if it's, again, someone had talked about anger, I think is a question. You know, we can run into trouble. And I did want to, you know, just quickly, you know, to acknowledge that there is nothing wrong with anger, and there's nothing wrong with tears. You know, anger, we know that anger is a very normal, healthy emotion. We just kind of got to figure out what's underneath that, you know, coming from. But I want to stress the importance and the validity of anger.
Makes sense.
It's a real good, normal, healthy emotion to have.
Yeah. So Terri,
you look like you want to say something.
I know. I just wanted to kind of like just clarify something here. So just from your professional opinion, would you say that grief, would it be a fine line then between grieving and being depressed or anxiety? Would that be a fine line where people don't necessarily know if they're grieving for something or they're depressed, or like, how would you clarify that one if anybody was to come to you and say, I don't know what's wrong with me, I'm depressed, or maybe they've lost something but they don't realize that affected them more than they think.
Yeah, great, thanks so much, Jackie. You know, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of times someone would come and it would just be, you know, depression and anxiety, and that's where you know, talking about, you know, tell me about some of the losses that you've had. But I want to say that anxiety and depression are very common and normal symptoms that we experience and that we could feel and have as part of our grief, as our feelings. And it's important to acknowledge it, but it's also important to understand, again, the normalcy of it, and that whether we're having these symptoms as a relation to the, you know, to the grief, or is it more serious? Is it more serious forms of depression, which, you know, a lot of times we would see pending. Again, I would be curious on what was the loss like? What did it mean to you? What was the relationship like? What was the move like to you? What was the divorce like for you? You know, and then so that curiosity of why are you feeling, you know, why are you feeling depressed, and why, and so, and those feelings of anxiety and not coping. Now, if it's, you know, pending right after the loss, and people are always saying to me, how long is grief going to last for? How long am I going to feel this way? Everybody's different. The uniqueness of the loss and the uniqueness of the relationship we've had varies from person to person, and varies from family member to family member. So not everybody would react the same. And so that's why it's important to really, you know, pay attention to that. If you're not getting out of bed, and you know, 8, 9, 10 a month later, a year later, and you're not getting out of bed, and you're not eating, and you're not drinking, and you're really, really withdrawn, then, you know, yeah, I would definitely, you know, look at that and the importance of that around that clinical piece of the depression diagnosis, of the anxiety or of the symptoms of that. But I always say it's important to talk to your doctor about those symptoms. But I think it's also important to acknowledge and talk about any losses that we may have experienced, but again, there's also lots of other causes that may cause symptoms of anxiety and depression. An example, what we're all going through right now.
Right. Yeah.
COVID. So
no kidding. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. Okay.
Do we need to talk a little bit more about because it is really important when I talk about grief, it's important to talk about the normal feelings of depression around loss, but then there's also the seriousness of clinical depression. And I think where having a good therapist and having a good dialogue, relationship, conversation with your doctor around that, definitely feel there's that room for those conversations, and there's medication, and so there's room for both, and it is very important. But those feelings of depression and anxiety definitely go along with those feelings of grief, and if they're not, they can definitely get worse.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that makes sense. That makes total sense. Holy, that's a load up right there.
It's important, right?
Yeah. For sure.
Depression and anxiety are really really important.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Okay, so I guess I'll just jump into the next question just so that we can fly through this. So someone asked, is ignoring the grieving process when losing a family member harmful to your health? And I think we already kind of almost covered that earlier. Yeah. Should we just jump to the next one then? Yeah. Okay, so the next one is it common for a mother or father's illness before they passed away be more detrimental and or scarring to one's mental health than the actual passing of the loved one?
Yeah, that's also a really good question. And I think that's where that piece of anticipatory grief is anticipating, and again, grief, those feelings that we have around, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my mother and my father. And what is that illness like? And, sometimes the illness can be so traumatic on family members that when that individual actually dies, it can even be a little bit more of a relief. But right, as I've said, it is still important to talk about the losses, the feeling of it, and that if you are, I'm going to miss them, I'm angry, I'm sad, but oh, you know what, I'm relieved that they're no longer suffering. Sometimes, whether it is like an example for what I see all the time, Alzheimer's, cancers, supporting a loved one going through some of these diseases can really be very scarring, as is said, to them. And it can cause, it can cause, for some people, I feel very comfortable in saying some trauma, during and then even after, and it might not be related, to the death. It can be very much related to that illness and what the family, went through, because again, these diseases can be physically ugly. There can be wounds and scars and machines, and that can, scar people. And, and then the after fact of, there's that relief, but then it's just like, my parents are gone. It's done. And so at times, we would see, again, some what we would call some complicated grief.
For sure.
Around that. So definitely, and that other piece of relief after someone has gone is a form of a grief. It's a feeling. And, I just want the listeners out there to know that that's okay too.
Okay.
For sure.
And would you recommend that, if somebody had parents that were ill and they knew that they were going to pass on, would you recommend that they actually come and see someone like yourself, like a grief therapist, so that they can walk through the process prior to them passing on in that case?
Yeah, absolutely, Jackie. Yeah, so beautiful. I think throughout all that, all that yucky stuff and the fear, pain, and, even the treatment, even if that their individual doesn't die, it can be difficult going to sit with someone who's going through chemo or going through radiation and different treatments, and the impacts it has can be scarring on adult children. I did my master's practicum at the psychosocial oncology at Tom Baker. And there was a lot of work that we did with people who were supporting loved ones going through cancer. And again, in my everyday job, supporting going through Alzheimer's disease, that it is very trauma.
Yeah.
I definitely, absolutely, Jackie would agree with that.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. I hope anybody that's going through that out there, they know that there's options.
Yeah, give yourself permission to unload and to talk and to process. Start mourning, start talking about those feelings of grief that you're having in the moment. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Terri. This is awesome. Like,
yeah,
I am learning so much right now. Oh man, and I'm so grateful for everybody that sent these awesome questions too, because like it's so important. For if there was a question that you even had in mind, this is you're covering it. I love it. Thanks, Terri. All right, well, I guess we'll move on to the next question.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So, yeah, the next question is interesting. I actually just thought of a two-part for it, but the next question is, how can you process grieving the death of a family member you have had a bad relationship with? And in turn, I guess I'd also just like in relation to what you were just talking about, even if that family member hasn't passed, like how do you grieve even the loss of that relationship of somebody you have a bad relationship? So I guess it's like a two-part, grieving the death of somebody with a bad relationship, but even just they're not passing, how do you process the loss of what wasn't, or does that make sense?
Oh yeah, great, Adrian, thank you again. Yeah, absolutely, because we do, sometimes we have these hopes and we have these dreams of what maybe we had hoped a parent would be, or a grandparent would be, or a partner would be, and things didn't work out, the way that we wanted it to. And so again, acknowledge what we had hoped, what we had wanted, what we had yearned. Right? That is such an important piece too, because that yearning is that we wanted that so badly, and we didn't get it. And then for an example, like in the first part of the question is, well, that person is gone. And so sometimes at end of life or in sickness, we don't get to finish that unfinished business, that we've had. And so again, during and after, it's important, to talk about that and to say, tell me about it. Why was that relationship not good? For the relationship to be good. What were you hoping for? Was there anything good about that relationship? Or are you relieved that person is gone of your life?
Right.
Right. And then, and then what does that look like? And so I think, it's important to, to process that and get yourself someone to talk to. And if it's not a professional, a good trusting person, because through this whole journey, one of the things that can help you get through it, not get over it, not recover from it, because it is, you get over a cold, you get over a flu, you recover from an illness. Grief is a journey. It's a spiritual journey, and we don't get over it. We go. And when we have these relationships and we've had those losses of those hopes and those dreams, or someone dies or is sick, and we're not going to have that relationship. And it can definitely cause complexities in your, in your life and in your journey and in your mind and in your heart. And I think it's important to, again, to really to talk about it, because there are lots of people that die or leave, or no longer in people's lives, and those relationships were not good and they were not healthy. You know, I think we've all experienced that, but again, it's important to acknowledge and process it's the good, the bad, and the ugly. And
Yeah.
can we, right? Because it can be really ugly. And how can we process in moving forward, reconcile it? How can your life look a little different? And can you give yourself permission to move through?
For sure. I'm curious, like, I know everyone's different, of course, depending on where you are and what you're feeling, but in terms of, and this is definitely personal for me, but in terms of like moving through that grief of what wasn't with a family member, what like those expectations or what you thought it would be and it wasn't, how would somebody even start that process? Or do you have any sort of suggestions on like where someone starts to move through those feelings so that they can move through it and move on?
So sometimes what I have done is we've pretended that person is in the room. So number one, you have to be with someone that's really skilled, and that's someone that you trust to be able to kind of go through that. That can be pretty raw and it can be scary. So again, I would recommend you doing it with someone that you feel really safe and trustworthy with. And so what I've done, we've done kind of like that empty chair thing where that person is there. I've had people write a letter to that person to journal it. We've talked a lot about at times fantasy, you know, that fantasy of what you had hoped that relationship was like. And we've talked about that. What would it have looked like? What would you have liked? So, you know, going through that. And again, this is where I feel so incredibly honored that I am able to sit present and support people as they, you know, as they go through this. We don't go around it.
Right.
Go through it, and it's painful.
Yes.
I bet it brings a lot of emotions too for everyone, right? Like, do you get people like really getting so angry while they're talking to you as they're going through that fantasy or whatever the case may be?
Of what they had hoped or their dreams of what had wished that person was for them. And so it's really important to be able to be with someone that you feel safe with. And, you know, there are some tools that I use. I have a tool that I use that I love, the Total Truth Letter. And I've actually written it myself. And it talks about, you know, I hated it when, it made me angry when, and it goes through those, as we would call, you know, that onion of peeling through those layers. And it goes through forgiveness and resentment and all I had ever wanted and hoped. And then it kind of ends with love. And so when I do that, you know, I definitely need to know a little bit about the relationship and if there was abuse involved, because, you know, stuff like that can become complicated. But that's a tool that I use. Journaling, again, writing that individual letter. And then it's like, well, what are we going to do with that letter? Are we going to send it to that individual if they're still alive? Are we going to have some sort of a ceremony when it comes to, again, grief and loss? Ceremony, tradition, huge, you know. So are we a ceremony? Are we going to shred it and rip it and rip it and rip it into pieces?
I love that. Yeah.
What are we going to do with it? How are we going to say hello to those feelings of pain and then say goodbye? So, you know, that's kind of a strategy that at times that, you know, that I use. So, yeah.
That is very powerful.
I'm
getting goosebumps. Just,
Yeah. And so again, it's, you know, it's important. Oh, this and so died. And it's how, well, you know what? That person can have been a jerk, an asshole. And, and that person could have left a lot of pain and unanswered stuff. And, you know, and it's important to have that one safety person to kind of process that with, because that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And those feelings that you're having and that's halting you or stopping you in your morning journey, that's not okay.
Right.
So we need to go through that.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for explaining that. I definitely feel like, yeah, a lot of times, you know, if you don't have a good relationship with someone and they pass, or, you know, there's kind of this idea that it's not, you shouldn't be upset, or it's not real, or like even just the grieving of what wasn't. I definitely, at least in my own personal experience, have definitely felt, you know, people tend to brush it aside, or we're not maybe made to feel comfortable expressing that. So yeah, I super appreciate you diving into that a bit more, because those feelings come up, even if that person was terrible, right? There's still grief attached to it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. You know,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I see that a lot with, you know, in my day to day with Alzheimer's, or, you know, with separation and divorce, right? You had hoped things would be great and you had wanted it. And that has just been a complete, you know, disappointment and sadness and anger there.
For
And
sure.
then, you know, and then that person dies, or you know, and then, or, you know, a parent or a grandparent, or an uncle or someone who, you know, maybe everybody else loved, but was a real jerk, or not, you know,
not a very nice person or something.
or
Yeah.
not a very nice person. And the other thing, I need for everybody to get those get over it's, those people that get over it's, move on, you know, they're in a better place. It wasn't meant to be, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I get those out of your life. So the get over it, the move on, or whatever, move them on out of your life, because
Move them on. Yeah.
you got it. That is not healthy. We do not buck up.
Yeah.
We do not get over. We go through.
For
That
sure.
makes
I like
sense.
that. Yeah, I really like that. Go through, not get over. I think that's important.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Terri. That's awesome.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, okay, let's move on. That was amazing. That was so powerful. I know we talked a lot about, you know, human loss and all that. So we're just going to jump into something that we can all kind of relate to. There's a next question here where, can you please touch on pet loss and how it's just as valid as a loss of a human? So, I mean, we're pet lovers. We have dogs, cats. I had fish before and I cried for them, like you know,
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
So
I'm actually like super invested in this question, because I have like a weird sort of like obsession with adopting really old animals. Like everyone, you know, and I just lost a cat last year, like super quick. Within about 15 hours, he went from totally normal to passing away. But it's interesting because I do feel like people are like, well, just stop adopting old cats. And I'm like, but I legit can't. It's actually a problem. Like, I just need them in my life. But I do feel like, yeah, they're so quickly brushed aside as it's not as important, or it's not as sad, or yeah. So sorry, yeah, can't mean to interrupt. I'm so invested in this, because I just like, it's just pets are such a big, big part.
They are. And Jackie and I actually had a really good conversation after I couldn't get into one of my Zoom exercise classes of hers, and I called her in a complete panic. Is we were talking about pet loss, and whoever put in that question, I said to Jackie, oh my God, I am so glad that somebody brought up pet loss. Pet loss is an example of a form of a disenfranchised grief. And what disenfranchised grief is, it's I learned about it through Dr. Ken Doka. And what it is, it's a type of grief that isn't always, that society doesn't always acknowledge, right? So when we have a death of an individual, right, we get casseroles for a week and lasagnas for a week and everything. And when we have a disenfranchised grief, like a pet loss, like a divorce or a separation, like a suicide, or incarceration, or a job loss, right? Those are the feelings that we have, but they're not always acknowledged by society.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're different. Or an example of an ex-in-law or someone dying, you know, I mean, and again, or even a lover, you know, these are all, again, I think I had mentioned incarceration, a death due to AIDS or something that's stigma, that's got a huge stigma related to it, that we might not get that support that we need. And pet loss is an example. I think we have come a long way with it, but I am brand new. And I'm, you know, this July, August, September, October, November, December, I'm 7 months in, and I'm saying I'm brand newly, because my dog Lexi, my everything other than my 2 children and my heart, she died very suddenly in July, and I miss her every single solitary day of every moment. I walk in the house and she's not there. And you know what? She was old. She lived, you know, she lived a great life. You took care of her. She was so lucky. And it's like, wah, 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 wah. My heart is breaking.
Right.
I loved her. She was part of our family when my children were young. And, you know, I said to my partner, you know, I'd always said that I am not going to make her suffer. I don't want her to be in pain. But, you know, when the time came, I looked at him and I said, I think this is it. And I really thought I would go backwards, but my love for her was so huge. When we got there, they said, you know, she was sick, and, you know, that was it. And, you know, we were with her when she died, and my kids were away.
Sorry, I'm like getting all emotional here.
I know. I'm ready to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, you know, and because of COVID, good old COVID, right? We had to gear up, and, you know, I was like sweating as it is. I'm like in menopause, but of course I had a mask gown, and I had my phone so my girls can see. My younger one lived, so she was able to, you know, come, and she came and said goodbye to her, because of course you could only be, you know, 2 people in a room, and they were all on FaceTime, and, you know, and the vet was incredible. But to this day, you know, my honesty, my rawness is I go over that death over and over and over. And when they said, you know, she's gone, I just couldn't, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So,
it's like,
you know,
it's so heartbreaking.
I know.
It's heartbreaking. And I, you know, I love her. I have her blanket on my bed. I have her paw print beside my bed, and I miss her. I mean, you know, I miss her. I loved her. We did everything we could for her. She was a great little dog for my girls when they were little and wouldn't go to sleep. And she got old, and I let her go when it was time to let her go because of how much I loved her. But the important thing is I want people to know it is a loss.
I'm a hot mess right now.
That's okay.
Jackie.
I'd hand you a tissue, Jackie. You and I have been
Sorry. I know, I'm like, do I have tissue?
we've been in tears together before in the
I know.
You know, but
Okay,
you know,
yeah.
it is a loss. Sometimes it's even more of a loss than losing a person. Sometimes these animals are people's children. They are family. And you know, and sometimes it's disenfranchised because, like, some people will say it was just a dog.
Yeah.
You know, you can get another dog, you know,
Yeah.
but it's like, no.
Right.
They have that own personality, that own doggy cuteness. Like you can't replace. I don't know. Like, people always seem to think that I mean, once the dog dies, oh, okay, that's fine, we'll get another one. No, it's not like that, because one dog to the another, they're going to be 2 different dogs that love you differently. Like, it won't be quite the same as what, you know, what was your dog's name again, Terry? Sorry.
Lexi,
like what Lexi would do, right? Or the way she would, you know, come and like lay on you, or like, oh my God, pets are like, anyway.
it is, and I think And again, I am so grateful for that question, because it is so important that we never, ever try to not ever put somebody down or minimize their grief, their feelings, and you do whatever it is you have to do, whether it's get a tattoo, whether it's talk to them, whether it's, you know, whether that's,
I love that.
and keep those leashes, keep the, keep,
Right.
okay, I'm gonna like be totally honest here. I had her food out till probably August, when my friend said, okay, this is
Okay,
enough.
Terri, stop. You're
You're
gonna
gonna
make me
get
die right
bugs.
now.
I know. So, Jackie,
Sorry. I'm like,
Jackie's done. Terri, I
Jackie's
do
gonna
have
be leaving the
a
podcast for a
question.
minute. Yeah.
I know, I'm like, I'm sorry.
Adrian, you know what? Tell those people, this is my new thing now. I don't know, nobody can see me, but the two of you, this is my new thing now. I feel, I'm in my mid 50s, so people piss me off.
Yeah.
This is what they get from me now. You love those senior dogs. You know that they're gonna die. And you are a beautiful person, a kind person to unconditionally love, and you have compassion. And if it is something that you want to do, that you love, that helps you, then don't you let anybody get through to you to stop doing that. And you are giving those animals a gift.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I definitely feel, I mean, yeah, they were, I guess I'm the cat person of the group. They were kitties, but that was definitely something where I feel like people, are just so quick to brush it aside. And so my cat, I had a similar story to your puppy, where it was just, he was fine, and then all of a sudden not. And I've always been of the mind frame that like, I will love them enough to know that like they shouldn't suffer. And so, I had to make the decision to let him go. And so I guess like my question is like, one thing I've really been like trying to work around is I actually only had him for about 1.5 years. So I'm kind of like baffled that I'm so attached, like, because I know. And I think it's just that conditioning of social, like of society of like, I only had him 18 months and, it's just a cat. And so I guess my question is like, how do you move through it, not get over it, but how do you like, so that when a memory pops up on Facebook, I don't keep bursting into tears for half the day. Just keep doing it. Just keep crying.
I'm sitting here going, okay, and I'm sorry, what's the problem here?
I just want him back.
Yes, and that is part of you yearning.
Right.
You're yearning to have that one animal back. I don't care how long you've had them in your life. I'm going based on how you are describing your love, your relationship, the uniqueness of the relationship.
Yeah.
That's important. The love given, the love received. Tears are not a sign of weakness.
For sure. Yeah.
Tears are there for a reason. And memory pops up, a smell, an animal that looks similar. There's a name for that, and those are called grief bursts, and that's okay. But going back again to what you had brought up earlier, Adrian, or I think maybe it was Jackie, I think about the depression. If you're not leaving the house, you're not getting to work, and this is going on and on and on, then I think we need to have some deeper conversations. And I would definitely encourage you to go, for sure, anyways, to go to the doc about that, because it's important. But talking about your cat, what was your cat's name?
Oh, Oliver.
Oliver. So talking about Oliver and reminiscing about Oliver, what you loved, what aggravated you the most, what you missed the most, what you don't miss the most. Again, that's going through pictures, going through videos. That's what's important. There have been so many times I've gone through videos, or I've heard the story over and over and over and over again of how their pet or their loved one died. That's what's important. I don't care if you had Oliver for a day or for years.
Yeah, for sure.
It
Can I
doesn't matter.
share-
And don't let anybody put you down for that ever. And if they do, you send them over to me.
That's great.
I'll take care of them. I'll give them a once over with this, you know?
Yeah, and I think
love
it's
that.
it's kind of like, you know, you should never really feel on the defensive for having grief. Yet I do for myself, at least I've encountered it because I just have grown up with animals, that it's just kind of a reoccurring thing. So I guess it's just flipping them off and telling them to mind their own business. I'd be sad about my kitty as much as I want.
That's right.
You get to be as sad as you want in regards, you know, to those animals. They loved you. They are there for you. These animals, some of these animals have gotten people through really, really difficult times. And nobody gets to put you down, dismiss your grief, and take that away from you. No way.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Oliver's
memory
will live on, Adrian. We'll keep talking about Oliver for as long as you want, girl.
Well, I mean,
and you
they
send me
coming. Like, it's pretty much a hobby at this point to just keep adopting cats.
Yeah, but you know, they're not going to replace Oliver, right?
Yeah.
No, they're all different. I mean, I had a cat before Oliver, and I have a cat now, and they're all old, you know, kitties that were just given the worst dishes out of life. So I almost feel like it's my mission to give them love. And I'm like, I don't care. Like you said, I don't care if I have them for a day or 5 years. I'm like, just try to love them as much as possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely have felt like gotten a lot of pushback where people are like, well, just stop adopting old cats. And I'm like, I don't want to. I just want to feel sad about it. Stop taking this away from me, because I'm going to keep adopting old cats. So just let me be sad.
Yeah. Good. Absolutely.
And besides, having an old cat and having a new one doesn't mean, I mean, sometimes even the small little kitties or animals that you get don't necessarily have a long life. So, I mean, it's, you know what I mean? So
you don't know.
Every animal deserves some form of love. So I don't see why the age should matter, really. I mean, but anyway. Yeah. Okay, well, I guess let's just, I think we have this covered. I feel like we need to do like 2 parts to this podcast, because I just want to know more.
I know.
Anytime.
So the next question, do you want to take that one, Adrian?
Sure. So Terri, can you please kind of explain how would somebody explain like grief and loss to younger children?
Yeah, absolutely. It's another really, really great question. Kids are very transparent and they're literal. And you know what? Kids are the best teachers on helping us and teaching us how to grieve and mourn, right? Again, mourning is that outward expression of what we're feeling inside. And it's, they will go out and they'll play, and they might experience some laughter and joy, and then they might come back, you know, and be really, really sad for a while. And I think the important thing is to let them be how they are in their grief. I definitely believe, depending again on their age, because kids mourn all the time. You take a dog away, or you take a stuffed animal or a toy, and you take that away, and sometimes you will see them get angry and cry. So an instinctual piece, and it's important again to acknowledge it. Don't hide it. Talk about it, and again, be very clear with the kids. It's important to say, mommy, daddy, grandma, grandpa, aunt, fish, dog, whoever has died. Kids understand died. Pass away, they don't always understand pass away, or has gone to heaven. Well, they might think someone, you know, has gone and flown to heaven. They have died. Died means final. They are not coming back. So I think it's really important. And then not to shelter them. You know, I often remember talking to my mentor here, Dr. Alan Wolfelt, talked a lot about a boy whose parent had died by suicide. And no one had mentioned to him that he had died by suicide. And he was maybe 9 or 10. I don't remember the age, but he went up on top of a roof or somewhere and said, I'm not coming down until, until you acknowledge how dad died. Kids, they know, and these family secrets and everything, they don't work.
No.
Yeah.
Hate family secrets. And especially it's important. So be really clear, be to the point, let them talk about it. I know it might be painful, but again, the most important thing is they died. And not to kind of, go around it. And kids will mourn at their different ages. And sometimes as they get older, they need to go back and do some catch up mourning, or need to talk about it more, or want again to talk about the loved one a little more. Again, kids are beautiful mourners. It's to big people like us, and we tell them to buck up or not talk about it, or don't bring it up to grandma because grandpa died, and you're going to make grandma really sad and cry.
Yeah.
That ain't gonna work. Because there are families that don't do grief. That is, that's where we can run into some oops and troubles. With kids, it's really important to be very clear, let them mourn. And if there is some sort of a service or a funeral and you feel that they're at an age where they can go, let them mourn, let them say hello to the body, coffin, be at the funeral, see how people love, acknowledge whatever it looks like now. It's definitely, very, very different now, which impacts people's ability to mourn and grieve. But it's important that they do attend and they learn. It's life. Years and years ago, they would have grandma, grandpa, brother, sister in the living room, and people would come to visit the body.
Right.
So, society, we have done nothing positive in helping people mourn and helping kids acknowledge and mourn and be real healthy grievers and mourners, acknowledge their feelings. So again, I would encourage them to be really clear in using the word died. They're not coming back. It doesn't mean they didn't love you. It doesn't mean you didn't love them. You can still talk to them. You can still draw. You can still do stuff. Memory linkages are really, really important. Don't throw those away. Keep them, have them. Again, I've got Lexi's collar, Lexi's leash. I wear grandmother's ring. When she died, I wear her ring all the time. And it's really, really important, whether it's clothing, jewelry, scents, blankets, perfume, colognes, anything, if those kids want to sleep with them, have them, acknowledge it. You don't want them to grow up and not be able to work through their own feelings of grief and mourn, and be able to mourn.
100%. Yeah.
So I know that like when I was growing up, in like, I don't know if it was a cultural thing or it was just my family would do this. They literally, we weren't allowed to, not that we weren't allowed, they wouldn't let us go to funeral if there was a family member that died. I don't remember ever going to my great grandmother's funeral, for example. She died when I was 9. Basically, it was like funerals are not for children. So like they didn't necessarily introduce that whole mourning process till we were a little bit older. And then you start learning how to mourn as you're older. And it's like, well, so I don't know if
feelings.
What's that?
The feelings were there inside.
Yeah.
I'm sure as a little girl or as a young girl, those feelings are there. Like I mentioned, our granddaughter today with our granddaughter, mom pulled the passy out of her mouth and she's cry and started to look for her passy. Well, that's an acknowledgement of grief. She was sad. Right. So again, comparing it, it's very, very, similar to that. And it's out of love and protection, right?
Right.
Protect our kids. We don't want our kids to see us sad or crying or the grandma or grandpa or an aunt or a sibling. But no, I think it's important. If you as a parent feel your kid, your child can, you know, can handle that and to be present to that, I think it's important. Important, and that
For
goes,
sure.
you know, it goes along with when a parent, you know, has lost a child or a spouse. You know, so important. You know, I want to see them. No, you don't want to see them. You don't want to remember them that way. Don't you dare tell a parent who has lost a child or they've lost their parent or sibling that you don't want to see them. You have no right to say. So if they want to go and see that child, whether it's a hair, whether it's part of their face, their feet, their hands, or whatever, that is their child and you have no right.
Right.
If they don't want to see them, that's a completely different story.
Yeah.
In the medical field, don't get me started on that, because that
don't get anything,
you know. And the other thing I wanted to quickly mention too, as I know where we are in time, is that the perinatal loss is also a form of a disenfranchised grief. And this is another loss where, you know, people's words of wisdom mean well, but they are just shit. They are shit, and they're, oh, you can try again. Or, I didn't want to have this one. Da, da, da. Again. Right?
Totally.
It's huge. So again, I wanted to acknowledge how important, you know, that pet loss, that perinatal loss is so important and so painful. And people's loved ones who have good intentions can be very destructive.
That makes sense. Yeah. So Terri, I just wanted to ask one more question, and I think we may have to just close this off, and then we'll have to have a second part to this. So we'll just ask one final question for now. So someone asked, how does one work through the guilt of not doing enough to help the loved one that passed on? So I don't know. What do you have for us there? That's a very, very powerful one, I think.
Yeah, but it's, you know, guilt again is a real guilt is again an emotion, a feeling that we have. It can be very detrimental and hurtful to ourselves. But again, you work through it, whether it's again journaling, going for therapy, and you know, talking about it and processing about what is it, like what is that guilt about? Where did that guilt come from? Where did those thoughts and feelings come from about why you felt you didn't do enough? And so that's where I would be curious to know about the individual, how they died, what was that like? What was that person's role with that individual? Maybe they lived out of town. Maybe they didn't call them enough. Maybe they had an argument with them that day. Maybe they were sick and they could, like, you know, who knows? But again, it's really important to acknowledge those feelings of guilt. The guilt can, again, be very harmful. And I think it's, again, to get that support to go through those feelings again and coming through that relationship. And then again, bringing maybe the deceased person in the room and saying, what would that person say to you about those feelings of guilt? You know?
Yeah.
And I'd be curious about that and kind of process those feelings around, you know, around that.
Okay.
Guilt is there. It's real. It's harmful. Again, I'd be curious to know.
Okay.
Oh my goodness.
That relationship and where
so that
from.
one needs a little bit of a deeper,
I know, I'm like already tearing up. I'm like, I don't want to talk about this question.
I know.
So when you say you don't want to talk about it, you know what I do with that? I'm like, oh, we need to talk about it.
I know. Yeah, I just well, I won't go too far into it because we're on a time crunch, but that's something I struggle with currently. So 4 years ago, just a couple weeks ago, actually was the anniversary, but 4 years ago, I lost a friend and I was the last person he spoke to. So that's something that, you know, I had a lot of his family reach out and they were like did you not, like, was there no signs, or like, what did he say? And so it's just a lot of like guilt, where I was like reading through our text messages, and then it's like, was there a sign? I don't think there was. Like, nobody really knew. He died from suicide, but like nobody knew. But then I think just like having all of like the family members, once everybody found out that I was the last conversation, it was like a lot of just reflecting on the last week that we had together, and then the text messages. And so it's just something that when you're like, well, imagine them in the room and what they would say, I was like, oh my God, he would just be like, what are you doing? Like, stop it. Like, I know he would say that, but that's something, I just had a very just like immediate reaction to, just because that is like, right, when you're the last conversation with somebody, and then you're like, I don't know, what did I miss? Especially when people they weren't accusing, they were very sweet about it. But then you keep getting that question of like, did I notice anything? Was there something missing?
Oh, is there something you could have done to change anything? Yeah, I can
where were they? Did they know anything? Like, and and that's not, and again, that might sound blaming, but when suicide is a choice, right? So we have feelings and thoughts about it, but not everybody completes it, right? And so your friend died by suicide, right? He completed suicide. He chose to end his life for whatever reason. And there's doctors, there's friends, there's spouses, there's siblings. If I would have known, if I didn't go out to the mailbox for 3 minutes, maybe they'd still be alive. Well, you know what my personal belief is that if they really wanted to die, they would have found a way to die anyways. At one point, it's a frame of mind. And suicide definitely is a complicated because if there is no note or anything, it can leave lots of unanswered questions. And the other thing is that searching and yearning. Those people are coming to you. That's all that they have left of him.
For sure.
You were that last person that spoke to. So you're in a way meeting their needs, but they're all coming to you, right? Sucking and wanting to know, but what's that doing to you? And then that's where, depending on how you're doing with it, you might need to kind of set a boundary and say, you know what, I need a timeout here.
Yeah.
I miss him too. I miss him too. I don't know if you don't know what was happening too. He made a choice. He ended his life. He did it. I miss him too. I'm so sorry for your loss. I know you probably have questions. This is all I know, but I miss him too. And I'm sad and I'm grieving and mourning too.
Yeah, for sure.
And so,
wow.
Wow. I mean, I ultimately just stopped responding to messages because I was like, I have nothing to say. And like, I couldn't, I was like, I don't know. I've already like dissected every conversation, every bit of it. So yeah, it's just, that guilt is definitely, it's a tricky one to move through. I feel like because you have the grief of losing somebody, but then that guilt, like, it's just it's twice as much.
It's a lot. And again, people who choose to die by suicide can lead very much to complicated grief, for sure. It's a tough one, and it's a huge one. And it's common and people go through it, but it's big. And I would definitely, I would encourage you to, again, find a safe person and to get some support around that.
For sure.
Healthy supportive people.
Yeah.
Right?
For sure.
Everybody's hurting a loss, but they're you're their person because you were the last one.
Right. For sure.
And you represent so much, but at times, unfortunately, they may not be able to see past that you're in pain. You're in big pain too.
Right. for sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Terri, you are amazing. Oh my goodness.
Yes,
there's just so much that we still want to ask, but with time constraints, I definitely think that this deserves a part 2, because we still have so many awesome questions that we still need to go through. But
I know we didn't. There are lots and lots of questions. I know somebody had asked a question about a toxic friendship. So that's also, again, somebody who's alive.
Yeah.
And grieving for that relationship. And I think that's also really, really important to be able to acknowledge the losses of those relationships as well. Again, with somebody who's still living, because there's grief around that too, as unhealthy it was. You were in a relationship with someone at one point, so there was positive. And so there's got to be some feelings around the loss of that. And so mourning people that are still alive is another whole other, podcast, but acknowledge that's also, just as important as we talked about as all the other types of losses.
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think we definitely, Jackie, we definitely need Terri back. We'll do a whole nother one, get all these questions.
That's right. And we just want to say thank you to every single person that sent in that questions. We truly, truly appreciate it. Terri, thank you so much for taking the time to join Adrian and I today. Wow. We cried a little bit. We laughed. We're like in art, like so many different emotions going on right now. And we would love to have you back if you're okay with that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And again, I wanted to thank everybody for their questions. I'm sorry if, we didn't get through them. I kind of had a feeling that would happen. And thank you, Adrian and Jackie, for letting me be your first guest. And also thank you for your openness, and Adrian for your honesty and sharing about Oliver and, your dear friend, who we lost by suicide. And Jackie and, oh my God, Jackie, thank you very much for thinking of me. And it was a real,
love you always, right?
It was a real honor. I have to say, Jackie, though, I just, always want to text you and apologize to you because I'm cursing you during some of the workouts because she knows how much I hate planks and and I'm cursing her, and then a lot of times I want to send her a text and go, "It's so bad. I'm so sorry that I cursed at you, but I really do love you."
I know it's all out of love, Terri. Don't even worry about it.
I was gonna say, Terri, don't worry. That's just part of our gig, is that we're always gonna have clients.
We know there's
things.
Yeah, there's love layered in between those, so it's all good.
Yeah, but this young lady over here has definitely, physically and emotionally, and my workouts has gotten me to a place that I feel really, really good about.
Oh, lovely.
Oh my God, what a way to close this off, but thank you so much.
Yeah.
So when closing, Terri, like, what are some ways, we'll definitely include them in the show notes for sure, but like, what are some ways people can get in contact you or anything, or learn just a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can just shoot me. I really don't have a full-fledged counseling website because I do work full-time. But, again, I do have a counseling, grief counseling private practice, and they can email me at twexler@shaw.ca, or, just give me a call, 403-681-8084, or they can reach out to, to Jackie, or you, and they know how to get a hold of me. Again, most of my grief work has been as a result of Dr. Alan Wolfelt. He's written a ton of books. I've been trained by him. I went down to Colorado and was trained, and, lots, Dr. Therese Rando, Robert Niemeyer, and Dr. Ken Doka. Those have been the ones that I've learned, a lot about, for my grief, through my own grief journey, and through trying to support others as they go through their own journey through this. So those are the ways that they can get in touch with me.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're
Thank
welcome,
you,
Adrian. It
Terri.
was really nice to meet you.
You too.
And again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
Yeah.
And thanks everybody for listening. And just to close things off, we'll definitely have a part 2 to this podcast. We appreciate all your reviews, your thumbs up. Give us that 5-star review. And Adrian, do you have anything to add to that?
That's it. Thank you so much, everybody. We appreciate you.
All right. Have a good one, team.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.